And thank you, everyone, participating in the event. As Shireen said, this is a joint presentation with my colleague Montserrat. Both of us have worked in the MENA region, but I am now global lead, and Montserrat is still working very actively in the region. So I'm going to share some ideas about the social protection agenda on longevity, aging, and long-term care. I'm not going to spend too much time on terminology, but this could be a whole area of discussion. We also wish we were in Egypt. I lived in Egypt, and I was based in Egypt for 4.5 years. So I'm missing Egypt a lot and my Egyptian friends. And thanks again, Shireen, for this invitation. So let me start with the obvious, and I can do quite quickly. I don't need to speak too much, I guess. In this audience, to justify that the world population is aging very fast. There are countries that are today already aged by normal standards, and there are countries that are considered to be young, but the young countries are aging very fast. And this has justified some rethinking of our aging agenda. And I think the aging agenda in several of the countries where we are working. On the one hand, there is the issue of pensions. We come from a pensions background, and we have historically focused a lot of our attention to the financial support of the elderly through pensions and non-contributory pensions and social assistance. But we have also realized that increasingly a number of connected topics have to be addressed at the same time as the financial support or financial protection issues are addressed. There is aging implies important changes in the labor force and the economy. The aging phenomenon is not only has to be framed in a broader phenomenon of demographic change, where not only life is increasingly being extended, and this is a good part and the very good news of aging, but also fertility rates are going down as population ages. And this has implications in terms of, the composition of the productive labor force and the productivity of the economy that need to be sorted out. Can we go to the next slide? So in this slide, we see on the left side, population aging as the catalyzer or the justification of an entire set of issues, such as the fact that pensioners are increasing, retirees are going to increase much faster, that there's going to be a decrease in labor productivity if nothing else is done, just because the number of active workers is going to be proportionally lower compared with the entire population. And the last factor, and it's an implication of this, is that dependency and longer dependency periods are going to be extended. This has a number of consequences, such as higher demand for social and healthcare services, the long-term care is a central topic in this seminar, and it's something everybody is very familiar, but there's also some other consequences, such as the gender and intergenerational equity, the issue of public finances, and the economic growth. We tended at the World Bank, we tended to do a straight connection between aging and the fiscal problems, but we are now trying to focus on this more comprehensive agenda. This slide is showing that the countries that are today aged are not the ones that are aging faster. The young countries are aging faster. To make it simple, the horizontal line shows the situation of the projected population by age, that is the proportion of population aged 65 and plus as a percentage of total in 2050. And the vertical line shows the growth. That means the level is the horizontal line, the growth is the vertical line. So what we see is that the countries that are going to be youngest in 2050 are at the same time the countries that will be aging faster. You see that there is like a negative trend in the pond. And we can go to the next slide, which shows by regions, the same thing by regions. And what we see here is that the countries that are going to have the highest proportion of aging population are ECA, East Asia, and some countries in LAC. But the countries that are aging faster are MENA, Sub-Saharan Africa, and South Asia. So there is again a negative line if you try to draw the line over the circles that we have graphed here. You see that the regions that are younger that will have the lowest proportions of older population are at the same time the countries that are aging faster. And I would like to notice the case of MENA here. So this has driven us to think that the aging agenda needs to be able to prevent poverty through income support programs such as pensions, non-contributory pensions, and social assistance. But there's also a need to think of working lives. Working lives cannot be the same as they were 20 or 30 years ago. Just because the age groups, the older groups of the population are not homogeneous. They are a heterogeneous group that includes at least three subgroups. The first is the population that would retire based on regulations and laws that were set 20 or 30 or 50 years ago, but many of whom can still be continue to be productive, can still remain in the labor force, and there are advantages both at macro level and at individual level to remain at work, but they need to be supported for that. A second group is the group of people who would normally retire today at ages 60 or 65. It's just that this should happen at a later age. That is, those persons, those people who are no longer productive, whose productivity is going down, which now would not happen normally at the age of 60 or 65, but it may happen at the age of 70 or 75. And the third group is the population that is really dependent on long-term care or family support, which is basically, the people who are outliving the life expectancy, which is also a group that is becoming increasingly bigger. So the 90 plus, 95 plus, which were very rare some decades ago, and that are becoming increasingly more and more common thanks to the advances in medicine and science. There's a last pillar of migration that we want to highlight because migration can be at the same time a problem and a solution, an additional problem and a solution. It is a problem because a large number of populations that are migrating are not sharing the benefits of protection in the old age. Many of them work for years in foreign countries, and they do not acquire rights to get pensions or to get long-term care. But also many of them go back home, and they don't have also many pension or social care rights in their home countries. On the other hand, an important number of migrant workers are compensating because they are younger than the populations in the countries that are receiving them, are compensating the demographic imbalances, and in some cases are providing an important and potentially even more important labor force to provide long-term care services. Can we go to the next, please? So, adapting social insurance means the need to prepare the social insurance for the first group that I mentioned. You remember I talked about the group that potentially should be able to stay longer in the labor force. Many of them don't want to stay longer in the labor force. And there are many reasons why people are reluctant to staying in the labor force. They are not all individual reasons. Many of them are reasons related to expectations, behaviors, reactions of others, such as, for example, the employers who sometimes don't want to keep the older workers, despite the fact that their experience and their knowledge can be used productively. But the inflexibility of the programs means for employers, for workers, even for younger workers, that either you stay working for a longer time doing the same things that you did when you were 30 at the age of 60, or you have to retire. And people prefer to retire. However, we think that the more we make efforts to develop flexible schemes for retirement, we develop saving schemes to provide incentives for the workers to continue not only working, but also to continue saving, to have a broad base of non-contributory programs for those who do not have the capacity to save, and to use the technology. These are the biggest challenges that social insurance needs to address. And this requires a lot of coordination with other programs, and this requires a lot of use of IT systems, and this requires a lot of efforts to develop the skills and support skills development of older workers. Let's go to the next. This is a challenge of the first pillar. This slide shows the interaction between income-related benefits and non-contributory pensions, basic pensions and income replacement. these are concepts that I will pass very quickly. They are not new, but increasingly there is a challenge of rethinking the pension schemes in terms of the part of programs that are non-income related and the part of them that have to be income related. Let's go to the next. Longer working lives is, probably the biggest challenge that we are having today. Extending careers and changing behaviors towards extending careers. Um, there are many negative perceptions about working longer. And as I said, it's not only an individual choice, it is a choice that is also based on poor expectations of continuing being productive, continuing being employable, continuing being accepted in the labor force. And there are negative reactions, as I said, not only from the workers, also from the employers, and in some cases from the young people who think if the older workers stay working longer, they're going to take their job. There's a lot of evidence that this is not the case, but I'm not going to develop this concept, which is a bit technical. There's a lot of empirical research done to prove actually countries that increase the retirement age can increase the productivity of the economy and create more jobs for the youth, because the number of jobs is not a fixed amount that such that if an old person stays working, he's going to take or she is going to take the job of a young person. But anyway, I'm happy to answer clarification questions if required on this. But the negative perceptions need to be addressed separately. What is going on, why this is happening, and what can be done to reduce resistance of different groups, um, including the workers themselves, but also including other groups. So there are some experiences, not many, but there are some experiences showing that it is possible to find job opportunities for older workers, and where older workers can even be more productive. There is some need of investing in skills development, and many people think that investing in skills is a matter of children and youth, but some learnings can also be done with older workers, particularly those that require the use of experience and the bigger picture. Can we go to the next slide, please? We finally have long-term care and rehabilitation, which is, as I assume, has been the main topic of discussion in this seminar. But we think it's increasingly a substantive part of the aging agenda, particularly, for the third group, the second and especially the third group of the elderly population that I mentioned, those that become dependent on others. And there have been traditionally models of institutional care that have been developed mostly in developed countries, whereas a large number of countries in the developing world, particularly in MENA, in some parts of Asia, in Latin America, where the family care is still culturally very rooted and will continue to be a source of support to the elderly. But what we expect social policies to do is to be able to support these caregivers, family caregivers, with different interventions. In some cases, it may be income support. In some cases, it may be social care centers that can complement the family care. In some cases, it can be community-based care. NGOs are increasingly playing a role. The private sector is also playing a role. And there's a number of alternative models that can be developed to complement or support the family-based care. Let's go to the next slide. Next slide, please. Well, the COVID crisis showed that there's not a linear process between family care and institutional care. The family and community based care have been strengthened and not weakened as the COVID as a learning or lesson of the COVID crisis. Home-based care should not prevent women from participating in the labor force. And in order to do this, you can continue having the family-based care, but supported by other public or private interventions. These may include professional support, and these may include developing skills for the family caregivers so that they are not only the caregivers of their family members, but they can potentially in the future develop skills and be certified to provide care to other elderly or persons with disability. And as I said before, there is an important place for migrant workers who are already providing these services in some OECD countries. Let's go to the following slide. The World Bank provides capacity building in pensions and aging. We will have a care core course in late September, early October in Spain. We have an e-learning on basic pensions that is almost ready and will be offered in a month or so. There are a number of seminars on aging. We have a modeling toolkit called PROST, and we are developing other modeling toolkits to estimate long-term care costs and to estimate readiness to develop long-term care programs. And we have a migration core course, which addresses the related issues of migration. Can we go to the next? Okay, and this is my last slide, and I will pass over to Montserrat, who will tell us something about the status of aging and pensions and care programs in MENA specifically. So on pensions, the most difficult challenge is the hostile environment towards the concept of extending working lives, and we are working on developing a different narrative that does not put all the focus on the fiscal consequences of aging, but on the needs of aging populations or population in demographic change, in societies of demographic change. The aging and care agenda is still growing, is still at an early phase. There are some important developments in ECA, that is in Europe and Central Asia, sorry for using acronyms, in East Asia, in Latin America, in MENA, but other regions, particularly in Africa, there is not much awareness of the importance of developing a long-term care programs, though this is changing. On longer working lives, I have spent enough time talking about the challenges because it's almost all challenges, behavioral challenges, the supply of skills development programs, which is not targeted to age the population. Normally, when we see TVET programs and we see skills development programs. Even when we talk about lifelong learning, we tend to think about learning of children, targeted to children, and exceptionally to young workers, but not older workers. And finally, the migration challenge, which is a big challenge in itself. It's a separate agenda. We just want to highlight the topics where we think there are links between the migration agenda and the aging agenda. I'm going to stop here and hand over to Montserrat, who will be briefly sharing some of her experience or our experience at the World Bank in MENA.
Worked until very recently on the pensions, on the income security, so the first block, right? Just to briefly summarize what are the main issues in the MENA region, in this particular block of income security. The pension schemes exist in all countries in the region, and they are quite heterogeneous, but they also have quite a lot of similarities. And they are in different stages. The same way that the countries are in different stages, demographically speaking, they also have different stages when we, when we talk about pension schemes. So there are some pension schemes that, for instance, they have already reached the deficit and they have even depleted reserves, while others, they still have some window of opportunity to think about reforms and make the system sustainable. What we have found this particular block to be very important is that it's very difficult to think medium long term. And when we think short term and we see these pension schemes with reserves or that they are not in deficit, then it's very difficult to talk about reforms because they are not considered like a priority. However, we have observed already in a few countries in the region that when they reach out to the deficit, they need to take the resources from other programs, particularly from health and education and other programs, to cover the deficit of the pension schemes. So again, we have worked a lot on this particular first block on pensions. However, we have observed as well that the political economy is very complex. And one of the reasons that we want to focus now in this more holistic agenda is because it would be easier also to comment about these type of reforms that are needed for these pension systems, because we put on the table not only these unpopular type of measures that require pension reforms, but also other more popular measures that will allow reforms to pass a little bit easily. For instance, in the MENA region, we have observed that when we compare with the rest of the world, the retirement ages, the effective retirement age, tend to be younger. So people in general retire a little bit earlier than the agenda, because then we work together with these that require increasing retirement ages, and at the same time work with the labor market, common labor market for older adults. Then there is also, we have worked a lot on the challenges of not only sustainability and affordability of the pension system, but also the challenges of equity, because many of these pension schemes in the region, they are quite unequal in the sense that there are individuals, for instance, that they, just to briefly summarize it, right? It's like people in general tend to put into the system, take out from the system more they put in, but some of them take more than others in a quite non-transparent and fair manner, right? So there is also the challenge of the adequacy, because all these pension schemes in the MENA region, usually by design, tend to be very generous. Effectively, many individuals do not receive an adequate pension And this is based to different type of factors. For instance, the fact that in the private sector, many people do not contribute enough number of years to obtain an adequate pension. Also, there is the issue of the pension indexation mechanism, which in many of the schemes in MENA countries are not automatically, the pensions are not automatically indexed, but political decision to increase pensions in many occasions, etc. So there are quite a few factors that make the pensions, even for those who are covered, that are not adequate. Then there are and of course there is finally the issue of coverage. In the MENA region, not everybody is covered by a pension system. When I'm talking about pension system, I'm talking about contributory pension system. So many people, I mean, again, the rate of coverage varies a lot among countries. We have countries where the coverage is higher than 60% of the labor force, but there are others that when we include all the expatriates, for instance, all the immigrants that are not covered by pension scheme, then the coverage is as low as 3 or 5%. So there is a lot of heterogeneity, a lot of diversity in this sense. But however, the bottom line is that not everybody will have a pension when they retire. So there is a lot of work that we are doing on expansion of coverage through different mechanisms, especially the non-standard type of work, self-employed, temporary part-time work, etc. That it's also a number that is increasing. So basically, this is the first block on pensions that, again, we have worked heavily and we keep working a lot on this block. But the difference with the past is that the narrative is quite different in the sense that in the past we tended to focus too much on the fiscal, financial concerns, and now the narrative is much more holistic, and we can talk together as an agenda, more comprehensive agenda. So we started working increasingly now on the topic of the long-term care as well in some countries, including the Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, and the countries. The Working Lives block, we have presented in some seminars on this issue of increasing retirement age and talking about these kind of unpopular measures of pension reforms, together with the accommodation of the labor market for older workers, basically looking at policies or programs of employers to make employers hire more older people, and also through employability of the older people. So again, there are many type of modalities and many type of programs that the OECD is increasingly doing as well, and that many of the countries of MENA, even if they are young, as we always said, they are aging very fast. And this is now the window of opportunity to consider all these policies. And finally, the migration, as Gustavo said, is a separate agenda that it is increasingly important for MENA to link it to the holistic and the more comprehensive aging agenda that we are working on. I try to be very brief, but of course there are many details, but we will, if there is any question, then we can develop further. Thank you.